Home prices are falling in Florida. So for example, this November marked only the second time in at least the last 12 years in which Florida's median sale price decreased compared to the previous year. Also, what really stood out to me based on this brand new report posted about a couple of days ago here is the amount of houses for sale just increased in Florida to at least a 9-year high. But despite this increase in the amount of houses for sale, sales still fell. I have a lot to share in today's video, including home sales, home prices, housing inventory, price reductions, and much, much more. Thank you everyone for joining me in today's video, and let's begin. This new report is from the Florida Realtors based on my own analysis as well. I'm going to share how these figures compare to years past, going all the way back until January of 2016. So looking at figures today, how it compares to pre-COVID, and also compared to 1 year ago. We're only looking at single family houses as well, excluding condos and also excluding brand new houses as well. Now here's something I want to talk about right off the bat here. This is very, very important. So make sure you guys are paying attention to this as I'm going over stats in today's video. Any metric that relates to a closed home sale, such as sale prices, days in the market, etc., is based on what the housing market was like about approximately 1 month ago. In other words, we're talking about November stats here. So this is what the market was like more or less in October when the home buyer got their offer accepted and therefore they locked in their rates. Why is this important? This is very important because average mortgage rates in October of 2023 increased to a 23-year high, the highest level since the year of 2000. And that was at 7.6%. for an average 30-year fix, according to Freddie Mac. Then 1 year later, in October of 2024, they dropped to 6.4%. Therefore, average rates for a 30-year fix decreased by approximately 1.4 percentage points. So keep this in mind because talking about trends that are lag indicators, days in the market, the median sold price, etc., is what the housing market was like back in October. In October, rates were much lower this year compared to 1 year ago. I mention this because looking at closed home sales, it decreased by 3.5%, as you can see right there. And also the median sold price in Florida also fell as well, despite this improvement in mortgage rates from 12 months ago. All right, so moving on, let's talk about closed home sales. And this is something I've been talking about on the channel for quite some time. I've been making these Florida updates for years now, but a lot of these metrics are not seasonally adjusted. So a closed home sale has some seasonal trends to it, right? And they actually touch on this right here. It says closed sales and many other metrics are affected by seasonal cycles. So actual trends are more accurately represented by year-over-year changes. In other words, comparing a month's sales to the amount of sales in the same month from the previous year, rather than looking at changes from 1 month to the next. So these figures are not seasonally adjusted, and therefore I'm going to be looking at November trends, how it compares to prior Novembers in years past. So here's what caught my attention regarding closed sales. So closed home sales, there was approximately 17,000 closed home sales this November for single family houses. That was down by 3.5%, which is an improvement compared to October and September percentages. However, though, at 17,000 sales, that's the fewest amount for the month of November since at least November of 2016, as far back as I can go looking at their data on their website, the lowest level since at least November of 2016, despite an improvement in rates. Let's also discuss home prices based on the median sale price. This means that half of the houses sold above this amount and half of the houses that sold this November sold below that amount. Here's what really caught my attention. It decreased by 0.6% at 410,700, a decrease from the 413,000 we saw 12 months ago. Like I mentioned, this is only the second time in at least the last 12 years in which it decreased compared to the previous year. The last time it happened was this August when it decreased by 0.8% compared to August of 2023. Perhaps this is relatively insignificant though, because the rapid rise in home prices over the past several years has been eye-opening to say the least. For example, in November of 2019, it was only $267,300. So home prices have increased a giant amount by 54% over the past 5 years. However, Prices still fell from the previous year despite a sharp pullback in mortgage rates, again decreasing by about 1.4 percentage points, going from a 23-year high down to a multi-month low. Therefore, you would think that prices would rise given this significant decrease in rates, but in fact, sales and prices still decrease. Of course, like I mentioned right there, there's other factors at play, such as a sharp run-up in home insurance rates in Florida, for example. And that, coupled with the fact that inventory is at least a 9-year high, is causing the growth rate of home prices to be relatively muted, and in fact, this November to decrease from November of 2023. Because inventory has been on the rise, also houses on average are selling for far less than the seller's asking price. I love how the Florida Realtors shares the sale price to original list price received. So you look at the sale price compared to the original asking price of the home seller. That was at 95.8%. This means that on average, this November, houses sold for 4.2 percentage points less than the seller's asking price. Let me give you guys an example. Let's say the asking price or the original asking price was $400,000. On average, it sold for $383,000, or a concession of $17,000 from the seller. What we're also seeing in the state of Florida as well is that houses are taking much longer to sell compared to years past. So it's taking about 47 days to sell a house. This means you list your home for sale. On average, you accept an offer from a home buyer in around 47 days. A giant increase of 62% from 1 year ago, which is much greater, of course, than the 0% gain we saw back in November of 2023. I did some digging for you guys as well. At 47 days this November, that's the highest level or the longest amount of days to sell a house for the month of November since at least November of 2016. So the big improvement in rates didn't cause houses to sell faster. In fact, the exact opposite happened, an increase of 62.1%. Again, likely due to the fact that inventory is at a 9-year high at least. When we look at new pending sales, a measure of home buyers getting the offer accepted for the month of November, we're seeing just the opposite though, because new pending home sales rose by 12.6% year over year to 19,000 new pendings. This is the first double-digit increase since April of 2021. But besides the previous month, which of course was October, at 19,000 new pending home sales, that's the lowest levels since December of 2023. In other words, we saw a sharp increase based on a relatively low level of sales. When you look at this chart below, looking at new pending home sales going back to January of 2020, this is really something that really caught my attention as well. So again, we have around 19,000 new pending home sales this November, obviously higher than last year, but higher than 2022 as well. Obviously, we're much lower than 2021. At that time, we had approaching 28,000 new pendings. And in 2020, in November, we had around 27,000. So the level of new pending home sales is higher compared to the past couple of years, but not nearly as high compared to the craziness right after the onset of COVID. Something to note here as well regarding pendings is that at 19,000, this is still less than pre-COVID levels, going all the way back until 2016, which is exactly opposite looking at new supply in the market or new listings that rose by 7.2%. Around 28,000 new listings hit the market this November. Like I mentioned, new pendings are slightly lower than 2019, but new listings is actually slightly higher than 2019's levels. So new listings are back to pre-pandemic norms, but pending sales are lagging behind. Let's take a look at active listings or the amount of houses for sale. This is pretty eye-opening here. Over 100,000 houses for sale by the end of November this year, up by 26.9%, which is an improvement compared to previous months. But at 100,788, this is the highest levels in at least the last 9 years. And that's just not looking at November, that's looking at any month, the highest level since at least January of 2016. It's also approximately 17% higher than November of 2019. So higher than compared to pre-COVID levels, and obviously higher compared to any other month since 2016. And this, my friends, is one of the main reasons why we're seeing this kind of softness in the housing market in Florida. But I'll share some metros as well, because I'm going to share how there's 3 metros in particular that are really impacting overall the statewide figures because they have a lot more transactions than other cities in Florida. So stay tuned for that. I'll share how sales and home prices vary by each of the metros in Florida, at least the ones that the Florida Realtors tracks. And by the way, if you guys are getting any value out of today's video, then please hit the like button. I greatly appreciate that. This video takes me hours to make based on all the analysis involved. So hope you guys are getting a lot of value out of today's video. But let's continue on here, because the month supply is at 4.8 months, an increase of 29.7%. What does this really mean though? At 4.8 months, that's the highest level for any month since at least January of 2016. So inventory and also the month supply, the highest levels in about 9 years. Looking at the chart below, over the past several years at 4.8 months, obviously this is very much elevated. Looking at the all-time record low, that was set back in February of 2022, which is right there, when the month supply was less than 1 month. Now it's about 5 times that at 4.8 months. Lastly, for comparison's sake, at 4.8 months right now, this is also higher compared to pre-COVID. Back in November of 2019, it was at 3.5 months. Let's also have a look at closed home sales by price range. So this is really interesting, because the only price ranges that reported a gain compared to 12 months ago were in the range of 150 to 200,000. That rose by 3.1%. And also houses that sold for over $1 million increased by 1.8%. However, all other price tiers here decreased compared to the previous year. That was sales by price range. Let's have a look at inventory, or the amount of houses for sale by price range. There was only one price tier that decreased from 1 year ago. That was houses for less than $50,000. Only 45 houses for sale for less than that amount. The vast majority of houses that are for sale are in the range of $400,000 to $600,000. That rose by 25%. So all these price tiers increased by more than 10%. In fact, the smallest increase was actually for houses for over $1 million. It just goes to show how the upper range of the market is still competitive in Florida, which in fact is what we're seeing in California as well. The biggest increase in sales this November was actually for sales for over $2 million. Before we have a look at how each of the metros fared in Florida though, let's take a look at distressed home sales, which is defined by a foreclosure or a short sale. So there was approaching 17,000 regular or traditional home sales this November, only 121 foreclosures, and only 16 short sales. This means that less than 1% of all closed home sales came from a distressed home sale. In other words, around 99% came from a regular or traditional sale. So can you say a lack of foreclosures, to say the least? All right, if you guys are still watching today's video, then I appreciate you guys very much. Let's talk about how each of these metros fared. I want to share some kind of interesting snapshot looking at this. So again, around 17,000 closed home sales this November. Looking at the biggest metros, it was actually in Miami, the greater Miami area, around 2,400 closed home sales. That represents around 14% of all transactions in the state of Florida occurred in that metro. Also including the greater Tampa area, there was around 2,700 closed home sales. Therefore, that represents around 16% of all home sales in the state. Therefore, if we include the greater Miami area plus the greater Tampa area, that represents around 30% of all single-family home transactions in the state. In addition, if I were to include the Orlando metro, that would represent a total of 41% of all home sales in the state. So what happens in these 3 metros really impacts overall the statewide figures. So speaking of the state, again, sales decreased by 3.5% and the median sold price fell by 0.6%. The areas in which prices fell year over year were Cape Coral, Fort Myers, Florida, down by 3.7%, Gainesville down by 4.9%, Lakeland, Winter Haven Metro down by 3.2%, Northport, Sarasota down by 9.1%, and also we have Port St. Lucie down by 1.2. I'm probably mispronouncing that. My apologies. Punta Gorda down by 5.4%. And also Tampa decreased by 1% year over year. Now looking at all the metros that had at least 1,000 transactions, in other words, larger areas, Miami, Florida led the state up by 3.3%. And of course, because 14% of all activity occurs in the Miami, Florida area, this increase of 3.3% overall impacts the median sold price in the state of Florida. With that said, I appreciate you guys so much for watching today's video. Please like and subscribe. Have an amazing day, and we'll see you in the next video.